Mr. Kumar, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will attend a virtual summit of the seven-nation BIMSTEC grouping on Wednesday. The BIMSTEC, which is an acronym for Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, has emerged as a key platform for regional cooperation, particularly in areas of connectivity, trade and people-to-people contact. As BIMSTEC comprises India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Nepal, and Bhutan, do you think this grouping can become more relevant and agile as cooperation under South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation or SAARC has not been moving forward, particularly because of Pakistan's indifferent approach towards containing cross-border terrorism? How do you see the cooperation moving under BIMSTEC and Prime Minister attending the virtual summit of BIMSTEC on Wednesday?
I think BIMSTEC is a very important sub-regional organization. The reason, as you mentioned, that for South Asia and Bay of Bengal region, I think this is one organization which actually has much greater potential and it's far more effective than SAARC. Now, SAARC is not effective, as you know, for primarily two reasons. One is that Pakistan has a very non-cooperative attitude towards SAARC because they are geopolitically linked and geoeconomically linked to China. And therefore, you find that from every point of view, they have actually in a way hitched the wagon to China in terms of CPEC and so on and so forth. The second thing, of course, is sadly the tragic developments in Afghanistan have also meant that Afghanistan, which is part of SAARC, that also is no longer, in that sense, a kind of a member of an organization which will cover South Asia. So what you actually have is that short of these two countries, we have all the remaining SAARC member states. Along with that, we also have Myanmar and Thailand. The only problem now we have here is that, as you know, that some countries in the BIMSTEC region, they are actually having their own internal problems. We know about Myanmar, which actually in a way is experiencing diplomatic isolation. And even India actually is very sensitive in terms of, let's say, interacting with this country. And then you also have, let us say, quite serious domestic problems in Sri Lanka. And Nepal is still emerging from the kind of a, let's say, uncertainty, economic and political uncertainty, which is experienced in recent times. So we have these challenges, but it is still much more effective because member countries in one way share a common geopolitical objective, a common geopolitical purpose. So I think it has great potential, but even that potential by itself is not enough unless actually it has to be taken to, let's say, a somewhat higher level. And you have to understand now that because of the fact that we have had the COVID crisis, which has caused setback, economic setback and geopolitical setback, and then you now also have the Ukraine crisis. So because of these two things, you have the health issue, the economic recovery issue, the supply chain issue, and geopolitical uncertainty. So in one way, now this BIMSTEC actually has to chart a completely new course for this particular, let's say, phase in international relations and in regional developments.
Ambassador Kumar, the External Affairs Ministry in a statement on Saturday said that the COVID pandemic related challenges, the uncertainties within the international system that all BIMSTEC members are facing imparts greater urgency to the goal of taking BIMSTEC technical and economic cooperation to the next level. So how do you see this statement by the Ministry of External Affairs? Can BIMSTEC evolve itself to become a vibrant platform for regional cooperation like the ASEAN? How do you see it?
Well, even ASEAN is now facing a little bit of a problem, let us say, because Myanmar is member of ASEAN as well. So you see that kind of a geopolitical situation is getting somewhat mixed in South Asia and Southeast Asia. But what the Ministry of External Affairs have said is that there is a clearly defined, crystallized agenda for BIMSTEC to be taken at a higher level of regional economic cooperation. Like you rightly mentioned, I mentioned to you, of course, COVID has caused a setback. It has caused economic setback and social setback, and they've had a political fallout. So you find that the health infrastructure actually is something that is affecting all the countries, member countries of BIMSTEC. And also it requires a very different, a holistic kind of approach, which the Prime Minister has been talking about. And the WHO also is quite mentioning as to what should be the approach in the post-pandemic phase whenever it begins, because the pandemic is still not over. Now, in terms of uncertainties, I've also mentioned to you that because the fact that you have the geoeconomic, the global economic recovery somewhat developing after the COVID induced economic shock. But the complication of that is the supply chains. And these supply chains are a function both about the economic disruption caused by the pandemic in different regions, in different countries, and also the tensions arising from geopolitical uncertainty, first triggered by the pandemic, and now you have even greater tension with regard to Ukraine. So supply chains would again become a very serious challenge. Supply chains also means lack of availability of inputs of production, lack of established markets for finished products, and even commodities like petroleum products, like other commodities like food grains, and a whole lot of other issues that actually fuel the economy of any country forward. So these supply chains actually are going to become even greater challenge as we go along. And one upshot of that is rising inflation.
So under India's presidency of an expert group last year, a BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity was finalized. So this master plan actually envisages a seamless multimodal transport system across the region with efficient transit facilities to enhance the mobility of goods and people. So do you think time has now come for BIMSTEC to focus on specific areas like transport, like connectivity, so that in fact it can boost trade and investment, the intra-regional trade and investment. So how do you see BIMSTEC moving forward on the master plan for transport and connectivity, which was finalized under India's presidency of an expert group last year?
I think this is again a very critical aspect of BIMSTEC cooperation. We also know that BIMSTEC being a kind of a bridge organization between South Asia and Southeast Asia, so in one way easily fits into the larger sort of infrastructure connectivity plans for the entire region. So actually it helps a great deal in not only advancing India's strategic interest in South Asia, but also in Southeast Asia. So it fits in very well with that. And you mentioned that seamless transport is one issue. And India is involved, as you know, in some of these transportation connectivity projects via Myanmar. We also are, there's also the shipping cooperation agreement. So, easier shipping in the Bay of Bengal region, for example. You also have, facilitation of that. So, in terms of port development, they can bring in Sagarmala into it, and the entire issue of standardization and regulatory framework for the operation of ports, for freight and forwarding, and all these things will then get linked up to production centers in different parts of the BIMSTEC region. So it actually is very critical. And at this time, actually, again, has taken to an even higher level, because whilst we know that there is turmoil in Myanmar, because of which the surface transport actually is not quite so easy, but certainly in the shipping sector, a lot more can be done. And the government is working on that. And here, in fact, as you know, the Sagarmala and all, the entire conception in envisaging Sagarmala as to how to develop. So all of that can fit in very well with our objective and our vision as to what the BIMSTEC should be, let's say, in the post-pandemic phase.
We have been witnessing geopolitical flux because of a variety of reasons, including the crisis in Ukraine, developments in Afghanistan, situation in the Gulf region. So we are witnessing some sort of geopolitical flux, so to say. So what kind of focus or what kind of cooperation do you see from when is this summit of the BIMSTEC? What is your expectation?
Right. I think we need to be also a little realistic, because as you know that we are having for the first time Myanmar participating, but Myanmar's participation will be at the virtual level. Their foreign minister and the other officials will be doing that. And even the summit, although it's a virtual level, it's a virtual platform, there the representation of Myanmar would be actually that of the foreign minister. So you understand that there are, these kind of bit of a mismatch in terms of, let's say, the nature or the level of diplomatic engagement between, let's say, the member countries of BIMSTEC. So that is one factor that we have to realistically appraise when we actually think as to what we should be doing further. But it is significant actually, as you see from this summit onwards, is that we expect the adoption of the charter of BIMSTEC. This is actually extremely important because as you understand that the charter lays out everybody's responsibilities and it gives it a more legal enforcement. Then of course, connectivity master plan we've already talked about. Then we also know mutual legal assistance arrangement, cooperation between diplomatic academies, and we also now envisage they're setting up a technology transfer facility in Colombo. So you see that in a way, the building blocks for cooperation actually is quite considerable. I mean, you know that under the BIMSTEC, India actually hosts 4 centers. There is Center on Energy, Center on Weather and Climate, which is linked to National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, for Tourism and Traditional Medicines.
The threat of terrorism is a major challenge facing the region, including so many BIMSTEC countries facing the scourge of terrorism. So what kind of cooperation you envisage under the framework of BIMSTEC in dealing with terrorism and extremism?
Well, we actually have, as you know, this agreement on mutual legal assistance. This actually will provide the framework for cooperation amongst the member countries, but everything cannot, for example, be done, within this kind of a formal basis. As you know, with Myanmar, because of the relationship becoming a little more delicate, we have cooperation in regard to security-related cooperation, but yet it actually cannot take a formal shape. But at the same time, the national security establishments in all the countries, they actually keep in close contact with each other and share, as I said, whether it's robbery at sea or whether it is transnational crime or whether it is keeping track of the terrorist extremist elements. So all that actually requires this kind of cooperation. And the more, let's say, as I said, this organization develops, a kind of a more solid basis, not just at the leadership level, but also at the institution level, at the different agency level, then these issues can be addressed, I think, quite effectively.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar, for your detailed perspective about BIMSTEC and the expectations from the upcoming summit on Wednesday. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.